Okay, welcome to the third video of creating a matrix style animational widget. The first thing I want to do is show you what we'll be making in this project. Okay, so we're going to be making a little animational widget here. It's going to get two phrases from the back end, and it's just going to morph into them. So if we look at the back end and the widget, we have two phrases that you can change. If you change them, the phrases that will appear on the animation will change as well. So this is what we're going to be making in today's project. Okay, so the main aim for this video is to create the widget backend. To do that, we're going to be creating a new class, and this class is going to inherit from the WordPress Widget parent class. We're going to be using Constructor in that class, and we're going to be using the parents constructor from the parent class. We're going to be making a number of instances arguments. We're going to be using the shortened if statements to make sure there's always default values for our fields, and we're going to be creating two HTML fields. So this is the tasks that we're going to be doing. Before we start, let's have a quick look at the plugin. So the plugin that we've created and the code that you can find in the description below from my link is a plugin class. We have Constructor that adds the actions that we want, and these actions connect these methods up to the right hook. So this has allowed us to link up our CSS files and our JavaScript files to our plugin. We have linked up our widget object with our plugin. Do remember that we are going to call these attributes here instances. So in the widget object we call them instances. So we need two instances, title 1 and title 2, and then we're going to create three methods in this widget class. However, today we're going to be focusing on the backend method. Okay, so let's start doing the tasks. So what I've done is I've opened up the matrix folder, which is in the WordPress plugin folder, and today we're going to be working with the widget file, which is in the includes. So if we open up that, we're going to start programming in here. So if we look at the first task, we're going to be creating a new class for our widget. So I think the best way to do this is trying to use the template that WordPress can give you. So if you go online and you click search widget API WordPress and you look for the widget theme development handbook, and you go to the widget section, we will go down to the sample widget here. So we're going to go down to the sample widget and we're going to expand it, and we're going to just copy the code from the WordPress website, and we're going to put it into our class. So now we've actually made our widget. We just need to edit what's there. Okay, so now that we've got the widget template in our code, let's just have a quick overview of what is contained in that code. So this is the first section. This first value here, this name, this is the name of our class. We are going to be changing this in our code. This extends allows us to get attributes and methods from the parent class. So when you see extend, it allows inheritance to happen. After that, we've got two constructors. The first constructor is the constructor for our class. The parent constructor is the constructor found in the WordPress widget. So it's allowing us to use that constructor to add basic details for our widget. After that, we have the widget method. Now this widget method creates our front end. This is what we're going to be working with today. Do remember that this adds us to add our own classes to the widget. So what this means is, let's say you've made a website and you want the widget to appear similar to the website, maybe in certain color or shape. What you can do is you can add information into this argument here, so that's saying before the widget and after the widget, and before the title and after the title, I want you to display this information, and it allows it to conform to the appearance of a website. However, we're not going to worry about that in this project, because the only thing that we're going to be worried about is editing this code in between the before and after widget. This code allows us to change the way that our front-end widget works. So that's what we're going to be working with today. Do remember that instead of attributes, what we do to pass data around in our widget is we make an array of instances, and we put values into that instance, that array, and then we pass that array of instances into our methods, all our methods, and then we can call that instance. So instance is very important because this is how we pass our data around the methods in our class. So if we look, the second function is a form function, and this allows us to create the backend and creates those fields that we want. If you look here, what will happen is they've used this shortened kind of if statement that says if this is empty, or if this is not empty, then just use the value in the instant title, else input this into this title. So we're going to be using this. And then this is just the simple HTML. It creates our form. Do remember that this get field ID method, this allows us to create a WordPress kind of field that then we can then pass in to our update function. So these are important. And the last of all, we have these instances. This update function allows us to update our instance. So what will happen is we have these values in our form. We want these values to be displayed on the front end. So when you click that button and save it, these get field IDs allows that information to go into our update method, and then what we do is we change that information from the new instance to the new instance, and then we return that array, and then we can call it in all those in the front end. So that's the overview. Don't worry about it now if some of that has quickly passed you by, because we're going to be making our code step by step. But that's the overview of the widget. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, our first task, is to create a class that inherits from the WordPress Widget class. We've almost done that, but we have to make sure that our registered widget here is called the same thing. So if we take this code and we then stick it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this capital T, and I'm going to need to change the capital T here. So we have now created our class, and that inherits from the WordPress functions. That's the first task. Okay, so our second task is to add a constructor and a parent constructor that we've already done, but we just need to change the basic information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the base ID with matrix. So that's just going to be the basic ID that we use for the WordPress. We're going to make the title, so this is the title that appears in the widget section, and I'm going to put a description in the widget section. So this text is saved, and we just need to make sure that we save it in the right place. So if we look at here, when I'm saving this this information, this script information here, I need to put it in the same place. the same domain. So I just need to make sure that this matches up with this. So with that, I've created a constructor that holds the parent class, and I've got my essential information. Okay, so now I need to go to task 3. Okay, so if we look at to do the third task now, if we go down, we need to find the form method. If we look, we've already created the form method with a single instant argument, so we've done that. That is put in already. That's brilliant. So if we go that, we can tick that. Maybe what I can do first is create our 2 HTML fields. So do remember we have 2 fields. One is going to be phrase 1, the other one's going to be phrase 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to get rid of everything in there and then add my HTML in. So what I've done here is I've stopped my PHP here. I've given a little comment saying this is going to be HTML. I've added my first label, and I'm using the for keyword, which is bounding the label to the element. So for example, I'm saying I want this label to be linked to this get field ID phrase. So remember, we use this get field ID phrase to attach our values so it can be passed on into the update method. So if we think of this, this is our label. It's just label 4, and then making sure it matches to this get field ID phrase. Then what I've done is I've just created another PHP that's saying I want this to be linked to title, and again I'm saving this text, this title text, to the same DOM as we're saving all our text there. These escape, this is just to make sure that I clean the text from any characters before I output it, and then I just finish it off with a closed label. So that's the first one. The same thing I've done for the second one. Create a label. I've said I'm link it to this label, to this attribute, this element. Again, I then created my label, which is going to be title 2, and then I for both of them make an input field, and I'm saying I'm linking this to a WordPress class, which is wide fat. There's a few different classes that you can search, but I'm just going to link it to this one. The ID of this input has to be the same. So you see this phrase, it's the same thing here, so we're still using this get field ID to link, to create the ID for this text. Then I'm again saying the name of this text is going to be the same thing, so I'm adding the ID and name as phrase. And then what I'm doing is I'm closing it up, putting it as a text, and assigning the value here. Don't worry about this value phrase yet, because that's going to be task 4. And then I do the same thing down here for this field. I create an input class. I link it to the WordPress class. I add the ID, which is going to be phrase 2. I add the name, which is going to be phrase 2. Make sure its type is text, and I add the value to it so it displays it. So what I want to do with these values is I want to make sure that there's always something displayed. So before the code happens, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to say, look, check this instance here, check it, and check the phrase positioning in that instance. If it is not empty, remember this is a not, if it's not empty, then put this value into this phrase. If it is empty, then I want you to if it is empty, or if it isn't full, If it is empty, I want you to add this to it. Okay, so if it's not empty is probably what I'm looking for here. If it's not empty, I want you to add this into it. Same thing here. If it is not empty, do this. And if it's not empty, I want you to add this information to these phrase 2. So that means that there's always something in this phrase 1 and phrase 2 to be put into this value here. So again, if you want to have a look at the code and what I've done in this video and to complete all the tasks, then go to the link below and find the code, and you can have a look through it about the key elements that I've done in this video. Okay, so before you leave, if you can answer these 4 questions or answer the 3 questions and are able to do the 4th question, I think you have a very good understanding of everything you need to know to continue. So pause the video and have and answer these questions. So hopefully you've paused the video and let's go through it. So what is the array that allows us to move the data from the back end to the front end? We need to use the instant. Yeah, so that instant array allows us to move the data around, and all we need to do is make sure that we match up that position within that instance to all the methods. So in the back end, we need to use that get field ID to bound that value to that instance. That update method, we need to make sure that that title is linked into the position instance, and then we can get that information from the front end. Don't worry about too much if you don't understand it, because we're going to be learning a little bit more about how it works in the update method, but you do have to know that instance is the way that we pass data around that widget. What does the code below do? The code below here, this has a value phrase, and we're going to insert one of these values into it. So remember, the first element is the condition. Yeah, so this is saying this keyword empty, this is saying, is it empty? Now remember, this is a not, so it's actually saying, is this not empty? So this first value here, after this question mark, this is true. So if it is not empty, then insert this value into this variable. And then this second value is false. So it's saying if it is empty, then I want you to insert this value here into it. So that's what the code does, and we'll be using this kind of shortened if statements quite a few times because it allows us to be quite concise in our coding. Okay, so now we're going to be comparing the difference between the escape attributes. So remember, this allows us to clean the data. They all clean it to make sure they get rid of any kind of invalid or special characters before displaying it. So for this one, this cleans the data and will be used for HTML attributes. So for example, if we go back to our code, we've got an input ID, which is an attribute here. So we're using this escape attribute to clean this data. That's where we're using it. This for is an attribute for this HTML tag. So we use this escape attribute. So anytime you want to display something in a HTML attribute, you can use this WordPress function escape attribute to do that. Well, however, for the escaped HTML, this escapes HTML blocks. So if you want to actually display HTML, you want to use this one. So this is going to be good for the front end. So if we go in here, we've used it here. Yeah, and that is because we're going to be using this information, this text, in our front end data. So we're actually going to be using that HTML or this text for our HTML. So we want to make sure it's stripped of all invalid or special characters. And the other one, the last one, the escape attribute E, this displays the translated text. So it's not just used for adding it to an attribute, but you can display it. So for example here, we want to display this HTML or this title in our HTML. So we're displaying it in our HTML. So because we want to display it inside the HTML, we're going to use the escape attribute E. Again, the same with title 2. If you want to escape that into the HTML tag, so not the attributes, so not inside the label tag, but in between the label opening and closing tag, then we want to use that escape E attribute. Okay, it's the same. It only appears there because, for example, here, even though we want to display it, because it's within that value attribute, we're only going to use the escape attribute. We're not going to use the escape attribute E WordPress function. Okay, so they are the difference between the three WordPress functions. And so the last one, we were trying to make a third. The last task was to make a third phrase. So we can copy a lot of this information for our third phrase. So we've got phrase 3. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use phrase 3 positioning. I'm just going to copy this so it matches phrase 3. And I'm just going to have that as the title. So what we need to do now is add another field to our HTML. So if we look here, we've got we want to create a phrase 3 field. So we need to change the for value to bind the label to it. We want to change the title, so we're displaying this to title 3. The class is going to be the same because we're going to have the same style. The phrase is going to be different because, again, we want to make sure that's linked to our final one. And we want to have the name set as the same one. So we're going to have phrase 3. And if we keep going, we need to make sure that this echoes not the 2 value, but the phrase 3 value. Okay, so that is how you do the task 4. So let's have a look at what it looks like. Okay, so let's go to the website. We've got displaying nothing on the front end because we haven't done the front end widget yet. If we go to the dashboard and we go to the appearance, we can see our title there. So we see matrix widget, which is the name here. So that's what we've put here. So whatever goes there will appear in the title for that widget. Let's add that here. We have the description here, a matrix widget that displays a title. Again, that will be displayed in the essential information here. We have 3 titles: welcome to the matrix, do you want the red or blue pill, and phrase 3. And that is because we've set them as the default. So even if you click there, nothing should be done because we don't have an update button yet. So we haven't done that. However, we are now able to create our backend field names and attach it so it will be pushed onto the it will be saved in the widget so we can use it from the front end. So that's all that we're going to be doing today. If you found this helpful and you want to continue working with this matrix style plugin, subscribe and I'll keep you updated with the videos. And again, if you want to use the code that we've made today, I'm going to save it to my GitHub. So if you go to the bottom of the description, you should be able to see a link to get this code. So thank you and goodbye.